Hey everyone, it's Jana Verbakel Leach, realtor in London, Ontario. Thanks for watching my video. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. You'll find the links for that below. Now, this story that I'm about to tell you comes with a disclaimer, and that is that my client gave me permission to tell this story and actually said to me, Jana, you need to do a video about what happened to us. Now, full disclosure, this client was my seller client, so I was hired to represent him to sell his home. And he called me to sell his home after him and his girlfriend had entered into an agreement of purchase and sale privately without representation from myself or any real estate agent to purchase a property from someone who was also unrepresented. So they had lawyers drop their paperwork. Now, with this situation, there were a lot of things that could have been avoided, in my opinion, unfortunately, if there were someone, even just one professional involved in this transaction. And most of these things I can almost guarantee would have been avoided had there been representation on both sides. And oftentimes we hear as agents that, it's a better deal if you buy privately. And I asked him, I said, if you could rewind the clock and just pay me to represent you, do you think that would have been worth it? And it would have been worth every penny to avoid the headaches that they're now going through. And I wanted to share a couple of those with you because it's a real life example of what can happen when you don't have a professional involved in the transaction. Now, again, that's not to say it happens every time. There are absolutely private deals that go smoothly. And so it perpetuates this, you can just sell privately and it's no issue. But when things go badly, they go really badly. And I wanted to share that story with you in this case. So the first thing that happened with this property was the valuation. So the valuation was done by the sellers, and they're people that don't even live in the country anymore. And they had this inflated sense of value for the property. And they felt like because it wasn't being given to other people that they should get this higher value. Now, it just so happened that this gentleman I was talking about, the house had a really intrinsic value to him and his girlfriend because they have family in the neighborhood, and they were one of the few buyers who probably would be willing to pay that for the house. But the price that the sellers were asking, keep in mind, also did not reflect any brokerage fees. And any house that's traded on the open market includes brokerage fees. So in this case, there was no passing on of that savings whatsoever to the buyer, even though they're the ones taking on all the additional risk in this transaction. So the first issue was really the valuation of the property and a real unwillingness for those sellers to negotiate. They were also trying to negotiate and having the buyers pay, for example, for all of the seller's closing costs, which, in some US states, that's the standard practice. But that is not by any stretch the practice here, and again is not reflected in the value of the property. So being really kind of just out to lunch on what items should or should not be included in the negotiations of the property and ultimately that drive the value of the property. Now that might not seem like a big deal. Now let's fast forward to when they did the home inspection. So the buyers in this case were smart enough to at least do a home inspection, but they were surprised during this inspection to find out that the house had had a serious fire a number of years ago, and that was not something that was disclosed to them, which should have been disclosed to them before they ever negotiated the value of this home. Fire is something that is a stigma in a property and can affect the value of that property going forward. When the buyers attempted to renegotiate, the sellers wouldn't budge. And so they thought, okay, you know what, we're just going to suck it up and keep moving forward. So they moved forward. And they had agreed to a closing date. His house was now sold, which I sold, to align with the closing date on their purchase. Well, essentially 10 days before their proposed closing date on this private sale, they get a letter from that lawyer saying, yeah, I know we agreed to that closing date, but we've just been really busy and we don't have time to come and take out all of our valuables. So we're just not going to close. So these people who have now entered into a contract thinking they're getting the keys to this property on a certain date have now been told that they're not getting the keys for another almost 6 weeks. So they now have to find accommodations for 6 weeks. They have to store their items for 6 weeks. This is all over the holidays, all over New Year's. And essentially their only remedy at this point is either not to close, in which case they need to start the home buying process over again, or they can just suck it up and take whatever arbitrary closing date these sellers seem to want to decide. And so again, they're in this position saying like, why is this now coming as a surprise? And I just, I felt really badly for them, but not being able to be part of their transaction, it's not my part at all. I'm not allowed to actually advise them on anything that we could have done. And by then it's almost too late. So the long and short of it is, and those were just sort of the three big examples, was the value issue, lack of disclosure for major issues such as a fire, and ultimately not what's the word I'm looking for? Not honoring the things, not honoring the closing date that's in the contract. And so, three things that may seem very small, but in the grand scheme of things, when this home is part of a next step in your life and it's aligned with another transaction, this has caused so much stress and disruption, in their lives, as far as not knowing where they're going to live, not even knowing if they're going to get the house the way these sellers have acted. And at the end of it, he said to me, Jana, if I could have rewound time, I would have just used an agent. I will never do this again. And I think you should do a video about it. Now, he didn't want to guest star with me here today, but you know who you are. And I really appreciate you being honest with your experience and sharing it with me, because I think it will help a lot of other people going forward who may think that, everything's great and easy. And again, it might be okay, but when it goes badly, it goes really badly. And having a professional, at least one, involved in this transaction, I think really could have avoided a lot of those issues. So lesson learned. I hope you guys get the keys to your house soon. And anyway, if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those below. Sorry for the long video. It's a bit of a story today. And also happy holidays and happy new year.